Leo believed he was born to create masterpieces. As an apprentice in the workshop of the legendary watchmaker, Master Alistair, his talent was undeniable. He could understand the complex dance of gears and springs with a glance. His mind moved at lightning speed, and he dreamed of the day he would create his own grand complication, a watch so intricate it could track the stars. But his talent was a wild horse, and he had no patience for the reins. Master Alistair, on the other hand, was a man in love with the process. He was old, his movements slow and deliberate. He would spend an entire day polishing a single tiny gear, his focus absolute. He would spend a week calibrating a spring that was no thicker than a human hair. Leo, in his youthful arrogance, saw this not as mastery, but as madness. Why waste a whole day on one gear? He would mutter to himself, "I could assemble the entire movement in that time." One day, Leo decided to prove his genius. While the master was away, he attempted to assemble a complex chronograph. He worked with a feverish speed, his talented hands flying. But his haste was his undoing. A spring was set with a fraction too much force. A gear was seated without the perfect alignment. When he tried to start the watch, there was a sickening crunch. The delicate mechanism, the work of months, was ruined. When Alistair returned, he did not get angry. He simply looked at the shattered heart of the watch, then at Leo's shame-filled face. "Your talent is a flood, my boy," he said, his voice calm and steady. "It rushes and destroys. You have not yet learned to build the dam." Leo, expecting a lecture, was defiant. "I am faster than you. I understand these things better than anyone. This was just a mistake." "No," Alistair said softly. "This was the inevitable result. You want to build a cathedral, but you refuse to lay a single brick perfectly." He then walked to a dusty old chest and took out a small, velvet-lined box. Inside was a single, impossibly tiny, perfectly polished screw. "Your training begins again," Alistair announced. "Your only task is to make one of these, perfectly." Leo scoffed. "One screw? I can make 100 in a day." "I do not want 100 flawed screws," the master replied. "I want one that is perfect. Take as long as you need." For the first day, Leo worked with contemptuous speed, churning out dozens of screws. But under Alistair's magnifying glass, none were perfect. One had a microscopic burr on the edge. Another slot was a hair off center. A third's thread was not perfectly uniform. Day after day, Leo's pile of rejected screws grew. His frustration mounted. He was a genius, meant for grand designs, and he was being defeated by a single stupid screw. His speed slowed. His arrogance began to crack. He was forced to focus not on the finished product, but on the process, the precise angle of the file, the patient rhythm of the polishing cloth, the steady pressure of the cutter. His world, once filled with grand ambitions, shrank to the tiny gleaming head of a single screw. He stopped thinking about the masterpiece he wanted to build and thought only of the single perfect thing he had to create now. Weeks passed. Then, one afternoon, he brought a screw to the master. Alistair placed it under his glass, examining it in silence for a long time. He turned it over and over. Finally, he looked up, a rare, gentle smile on his face. "Yes," he said. "This is the one." Leo felt a surge of pride more profound than he had ever known. It was just a screw, but it was perfect. "Do you understand now?" Alistair asked, his voice soft. He gestured to a magnificent, half-finished clock on his main workbench, the Celestial Harmony, a legendary timepiece that tracked the planets. "You look at this and see a masterpiece. I see 10,000 perfect screws. I see 1,000 perfectly polished gears. I see 100 perfectly calibrated springs." He picked up the single screw Leo had made and held it out. "The masterpiece is not the clock, Leo. The masterpiece is this asterisk. It is the discipline to do one small thing perfectly. The clock is just what happens when you string 1,000 of those perfect moments together." The power is not in the grand design. It is in the daily discipline. That was the day Leo's true apprenticeship began. He did not touch a complex movement for another year. He made screws, he polished gears, he calibrated springs. He learned to love the slow, meditative rhythm of doing one small thing at a time. He learned that his talent was not a replacement for discipline, but a tool to be guided by it. Years later, Leo, now a master himself, stood before his own apprentice. The young boy was brilliant, ambitious, and deeply impatient. "Master," the boy said, "why do we waste so much time on these tiny parts? When will I get to build something great?" Leo smiled, a calm, knowing smile he had learned from his own master. He didn't answer. Instead, he reached into a velvet-lined box and took out a single, impossibly tiny, perfectly polished screw. "Your training begins now," he said, his voice full of a wisdom he had earned one perfect moment at a time. "Your only task is to make one of these perfectly.